You got to figure out, is this a crime? Is someone going to be charged with a crime and perhaps end up in jail for what happened to Helena Hutchins? It's a significant question, important question. Now, there is video of Alec Baldwin with the weapon. This was recorded, though, prior to the shooting, because the actual shooting was not recorded. You can see he's drawing the weapon. He's doing something with his thumb. You see his fingers on the trigger. He's shooting a scene for the movie. Now, again, this is not the actual shooting of Helena Hutchins, but it's in the same place. It's the same scene. And this was filmed just prior to the rehearsal where Helena Hutchins was shot and killed by Alec Baldwin. Now, Alec Baldwin, as you know, has spoken with police. He's spoken with law enforcement, spoken with investigators. Let's take a listen to part of that interview.
I take the gun out, and as it clears, as the barrel clears the hole, I turn and cock the gun over here. I turn and cock the gun goes off. It's supposed to be a cold gun. Nothing. No flash charges, nothing. Now, this is a puzzle to me. This is making me very emotional now, you know, but in my time, and I'm older now, but when I was younger and I was shooting guns and stuff, I've never seen a theatrical flash round where the material went through someone's armpit, came out their body, and hit somebody else in the shoulder. Yeah. I'm wondering if your department is prepared to go find out what comes out of his shoulder surgically. Is that a live round?
That's what we are actually looking at.
Is that a lot? Because it doesn't make any sense otherwise.
Yeah.
It hits her in the armpit, comes out her shoulder, goes into his shoulder, and he just told me on the phone, I talked to Joe. He said they showed me the x-ray, and the shape of the thing in my shoulder is the shape of a bullet. Now, all the rounds, I was told, you need to verify, I think this is important, they take the gun, they enter and all the rounds that are in there were either dummy rounds, no flash, cold rounds, or rounds with a flash. In the rehearsal, there should have been nothing. It should have been a cold gun with no rounds inside or dummy rounds, cosmetic rounds, no flash.
Okay, joining me now in New York, New York, film director with Rosso Films International, currently working on a World War II movie called Subject A. Stefano DeFrey is with us tonight. Great to see you. And in Salt Lake City, Utah, movie set expert, technical director, former Salt Lake City police officer, knows a lot about guns. Rob Joseph is with us. Welcome to you both. Thank you so much for being here. Stefano, let me start with you. Let me ask you about Alec Baldwin and what he's saying. He seems shocked. He seems completely like, what happened here? Is it normal, from your experience, that when an actor is handed a weapon, is that weapon checked in front of the actor, him or herself? Or is that done somewhere else and you just hand a gun and you say, here's a cold gun, go for it?
Thank you for having me on your show. So I like the lead-in that you said. Did Alec Baldwin violate the protocols that were on set? The protocols would be that you would have the props master hand the gun to the armor. The armor would then check it, obviously, and be the specialist for guns, and then hand it over to the assistant director. The assistant director has to call for a cold gun. Rarely would an actor want to fiddle with it. They wouldn't want to mess with that gun, and they would trust the line of command, the sequencing of command, so that they would be ready to, carry on their job, do the take, and, start rolling. So Alec Baldwin's case seems very, very plausible in his testimony. Now, it's obvious that the protocols were not followed. Was it a situation where they didn't actually have someone check it through either the props master or the armor? Was the cold gun called too early in anticipation, so that 3 people actually haven't checked the gun or don't know anything or have any experience with firearms, so they're just calling cold gun just for the sake of beginning the shooting? And by that I mean the filming of the scene. So we have to ask these questions. The second
Let me
question
ask
that
you
I
this,
wanna bring
though,
up just-
Stefano. Let me jump in
Yeah.
there, because this was just a rehearsal. They weren't
Yeah.
even filming anything at this moment. They were sort of like blocking it and rehearsing the draw of the weapon. So under those circumstances, would you use the actual gun that you're going to use to be filmed during the rehearsal part?
On my sets, you wouldn't. On my sets, you wouldn't. Why? Because the liability is too high. It's just too high. Why would you risk that situation in the rehearsal process? You would only take out that for the actual the filming of it, because the risk, as we know, and we know this back from Brandon Lee, Bruce Lee's son, in a very famous case in Hollywood from The Crow, when he was killed from a projectile. So, and that was ruled as an accident. So the liability for our sets as a director and producer, absolutely not. The other thing that I want to ask to everybody here is, was 20 feet respected? Because on our film sets, we always have, even if you have blanks, you have to respect at minimum of 20 feet of a clear line of fire, because we know that some weapons give powder and also compress. So was that violated and respected from Alec Baldwin's side as well, whether it was a mistake or not a mistake? These are all things that are very important questions to ask.
All right, Rob Joseph, let me ask you. Cold gun. Someone hands you a gun, says cold gun. Should you trust them?
Absolutely not. It becomes the handler of the weapon responsibility at that point to ensure that the gun is in fact cold and not loaded. And I like protocols that I used on the set, even in two Baldwin movies. I actually worked on The Crow's Salvation. Actually, assistant directors or directors never touched the firearm at all. It went straight from the property master to the armorer, and I was brought on set, would inspect the gun in the presence of the actor, show the actor themselves that the weapon was clear.
So
and
wait,
able to be used.
Rob, stop right there. Explain to me that scenario that you did, where you are checking the gun in front of the actor. So how does that happen, and where do you do that?
Well, when the director calls for a firearm to be brought to the set, the property master would bring the weapon to the set, and in conjunction with the property master, in my case, as I worked on those sets, the property master would deliver the gun to the armorer, and the armorer and I would both check the weapon, and we would do it in the presence of the actor or actress, and we would show them that the weapon was clear. So there was no question as to whether or not that weapon was safe. And then we'd also give instruction to the actor on what to do and how to handle the weapon safely. And this would happen every single time the weapon was called to be brought to the set.
Stefano, let me ask you about the actors working on your movies. Is there any level of training that is given to the actors about, some actors may very well be well-versed in handling a gun. They may actually be gun owners. Some may never have touched a weapon before. Is there any training, safety training, in how to handle it, or training in how to handle it so it looks like you know what you're doing? Handle it. Does that take place?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. During the pre-production process, we'll have an armorer that will meet with the actors that are handling the gun. So it's extremely important that they feel comfortable as well being handling this item and the firearm. So if they're not comfortable, they are more likely to make mistakes. The more comfortable they are, they know what protocols to follow, and also to make sure that, for example, not pointing it at a crew is a very simple thing, but not pointing it at crew, not pointing it at other crew members, making sure that they're comfortable with, that they know what's inside before they start rolling for a tape.
Stefano, let me ask you this, though. You just said something that like struck a chord here.
Yeah.
About pointing the weapon. Now, from my understanding, we've looked at this video that was that was filmed, that was filmed right before the shooting, in another rehearsal of the scene where he does the cross draw. And it seems that for purposes of this movie, the gun had to be pointed somewhat towards the camera. And you've got a director of photography, I'd assume, in most films is usually near the camera. So how do you deal with that? Because it wouldn't be the first time, I think, that we've ever seen a gun pointed towards a camera in that direction. And as we know, you're making a movie, the person who's in charge of the camera is going to be near the camera. So how do we deal with that situation?
There's two ways that I deal with it on our film sets. The first is you don't use the actual gun for your rehearsals. I would never do that, even though I would have the armor present during that time. That's the first thing. The armor is present during the whole period of time, but I would not have the actual gun being used during that rehearsal. The second thing is, no matter how much you want to get that shot, and now you're shooting on 6K, 8K, you have to maintain the 20 feet distance. You have to maintain the 20 feet distance. When I'm looking at that footage, I don't know, when I'm seeing Alec Baldwin pull out that revolver, he looks closer than that 20 feet. And so the person that's the most vulnerable is obviously the cinematographer, because she's holding the camera, she's managing the camera, and you can see, that looks like a lot closer than 20 feet. So for us, for the safety of the crew, for the entire set, you can crop in post-production. I would never have that closer and violate that 20-foot rule.
All right, we've got a lot more to get to this hour, folks. Don't go anywhere. We're taking a close look at the shooting death of Helena Hutchins, trying to figure out what happened, why did it happen, what were the protocols, what should the protocols have been, what are people saying, and at the end of the hour, who should be held responsible? Be right back. 2022 on Court TV has been unusual, extremely unusual. Criminal defendants in court going to trial, many charged with murder, several taking the stand, and one after the other being found not guilty.
We, the jury, find the defendant count 1, malice murder, not guilty.
Verdict as to count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty.
Verdict. We, the jury, finds as follows. The defendant is not guilty.
What is going on here? Why all of a sudden in 2022 are defendants being set free by juries from around the country? Our think tank weighs in.
with Worthy.com.
First with a hot gun. Now,
But you were supposed to be cold.
well, it was supposed to be cold or empty, but now, not only did I rehearse with a hot gun, I rehearsed with a gun that had a bullet inside. If that's what came out of your show, this is the most horrifying thing I've ever heard in my life.
Well, so yeah, and that's why I wanted to make sure that you, anytime that you shot a hot gun, you've never seen anything like this come out before.
Never.
Because I'm not familiar with prop guns. I could
Never.
tell you what a projectile looks like, and that does
Well,
look
let me
like
ask
a
you this.
projectile.
But see, that's a bullet.
Alec Baldwin realizing during that interview that a bullet came out of the gun that he fired. It was just a rehearsal. They weren't even filming. This was a rehearsal. This hour, we're taking a deep dive into this story, trying to understand what happened, why it happened, what normal protocols are. I want to bring in a special guest. Joining me now from Florida, actor, filmmaker, musician, John Schneider. John, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Vinny, thank you for having me. I know we had some technical difficulties, but thank you for having me here. I appreciate it.
Shot looks great from Florida. You look wonderful. So let me start here. When you first heard about what happened on the set of the shooting of Rust, and you heard that there was a gun was fired and the director of photography was shot and killed by Alec Baldwin, what was your first reaction to all of that?
My first reaction was that Alec didn't check the weapon as he should have. I heard one of your guests earlier, and the notion there seems to be a notion that there are two sets of protocols, one for civilians and one for actors. There's not one or two different kinds of firearm education. So I just saw him cock the weapon right there. He cocks a single action Colt 45. That's not an accidental motion. Run that again. You see him, right? His thumb goes back, he cocks the weapon. All right? We are asked to believe. You can see that he's in a small room. We are asked to believe that during a rehearsal, as you have pointed out several times, and yes, he would be using the proper firearm during a rehearsal, so they can get a look at it and see, how long it is, how the light shines on it, and all of that. So that's not unusual. What's unusual is that even if you were outside on a football field, he claims he didn't pull the trigger, okay? He cocked the gun. It's two parts. You cock the gun, you pull the trigger. It goes off. If you're in a rehearsal, you have no expectation whatsoever to hear anything from that firearm other than click, okay? So your expectation, that man right there, his expectation would have been to hear click. However, that's a Colt 45. That had the equivalent of a full load in it. It was loaded. It had a bullet in it. It went bang like you can't believe and would have pulled his arm back. The recoil on this particular weapon is such that when people hand it to you and you rehearse out in the shooting range, they say, be careful, that will take your arm off. Okay? So follow me with this. We are told to believe that an actor who expected click and got bang and fire and saw people fall down didn't know anything had gone wrong for 45 minutes. What planet is any of that possibly true?
She also went down, right? I mean, if she gets shot, two people actually got shot. She
got shot from this far away from, I can't do it on this screen, but she got shot point blank range. Now, when you do something like that, if you have blanks in a gun, which there's really no reason even to do that anymore. But if you do, you have a very thick piece of plexiglass like you would find at a bank teller, perhaps, for an additional layer of safety. There is never in anyone's film, in my history, I've been doing this since 1978. I've fired a lot of weapons. You don't ever have even a quarter load if you're that close to somebody. And I understand the shot. It's a very typical shot where I just did it. In the movie I have all this hair for. I just did that shot with a Colt Python. Very dangerous weapon. There was nobody behind the camera. There was nothing in the gun. When I picked up the gun, I checked it. Protocol is on the street and on the set and at a gun store or a gun show or anywhere, when you are handed a weapon, even when the person who hands it to you just proved it cold, you will, now it's in my hands, I will prove it cold again. And I will show those around me that it is indeed not loaded. It is impossible to believe for me that someone who has done more than one movie involving a firearm, and I don't know the actual number, but Alec has done a lot of movies involving firearms. It is impossible for me to believe that he is totally ignorant of protocol. And that seems to me to be what he is trying to convey in that interview. Whoa, not me. I'm sorry. You are responsible so that something like this doesn't happen. And you show the weapon to everyone on the set. Vinnie, if you were to hand me a weapon on a set, you would say, hey, John, here's a single-action Colt 45. You'd show me the chamber. You'd show 6 cylinders that were empty. And if it was not someone's expensive gun, you would dry fire it, not 6, but 7 times to prove to me that it was indeed not loaded. I would then say, Vinnie, thank you. I'd have the gun in my hand. I would prove it to myself and anyone else who wanted to look by spinning the chamber, showing them 6 empty spaces. Then I myself would fire it. It's not 6, but 7 times just to be sure. It's standard operating procedure. And we are also asked to believe that the prop man, person, the armorer, the first AD, and Alec all neglected to check this weapon properly. Plus, when you're on the other side of the camera, and I am a director as well, I've had guns pointed at me to set up shots. You make damn sure, as the person on the other side, that there's nothing in that weapon. There is no world on a film where people are in such a rush, pardon the pun, where these protocols are skipped, because obviously people's lives are at stake. And this, at the very least, I believe this is criminal negligence.
Let me ask you about something else that has come up here, and it seems this is something that Alec Baldwin was talking about and the armor is talking about. We're talking about hot gun, cold gun. We're talking about dummy rounds. We're talking about blanks. We're talking about a live, an actual bullet. If you get that gun and you've got, would you check it for dummy rounds? Could you tell the difference between a dummy round and an actual bullet? If it was like that, what would you do?
You can, but someone would hand it to you and say, there are 6 dummy rounds in this weapon. And you'd say, prove it, right? Or you'd dry fire it. 6, 7, again, 7 to err on the side of caution. You would dry fire it. Now, people who own firearms, and I own many firearms, they don't like you dry firing their guns, especially if they're if they're real Colts. This apparently was not. I think it was a Dakota. It was it's a copy. But if there was supposed to be dummy rounds in it, which are rounds that are fired, and the reason for that, Vinny, is when you are looking down the barrel of a gun like this, with a revolver, you can see whether it has anything in, like, you can see, wow. You can see whether it has anything in it or not. Okay, I'd love to be able to freeze that, but you should see the ends of dummy bullets in there. They are real bullets without any powder, so they're incapable of being fired. But that is an instance where you have even more safety protocols, because someone will dry fire that. They will prove that these are indeed dummy rounds and nothing can go wrong. Okay, so that argument actually makes it even harder to believe that no one really checked that weapon. This had to have been something that was done in a hurry, which makes no sense, because apparently, and maybe this is not the case, but apparently this was the first rehearsal after lunch. That's my understanding. Is that what your understanding is?
Yeah, my understanding is first one after lunch. The thing that we're showing, the thing that was the part that was actually filmed was I think probably before lunch. They broke for lunch and then they came back.
Well, then that footage would not prove anything, because that gun would be completely empty. It does make sense to have dummy rounds in a gun when you're shooting that close. That close.
Have you ever been on a set where there's been an actual bullet?
I have. It's been a long, long time since I've been on a set with an actual bullet. A long time ago, and not in this country. Okay? The only people who have live rounds on a set are security. There is no reason in the world for live rounds. So again, we're asked to believe that live rounds, blanks, and dummy rounds were all kept on the same cart. That is a violation of so many rules.
We have that cart. Let me show you the cart. We have the gun cart. We've got a photograph of it.
Okay.
Is that a mess, or is that normal?
That's a mess. That's an absolute mess. So there is people have said that people went out and they were target practicing during lunch. So I heard that. So if that's the case, then what the sheriff, and I did speak to the sheriff when this first happened, what I hope they did is they checked to see. So Alec comes in, it's a rehearsal. He cocks the gun or not, we don't know, and he says he didn't pull the trigger, but the gun went off and a projectile came out, a bullet came out. Okay. So here's my question. Was that the only bullet? Was that the only round of any kind in that weapon? Or were there 5 other ones? Were there 3 other ones? Were there 2 other ones? What we are asked to believe on another story I heard was that they were practicing with them, and lunch was over. You know, lunch being over is always a surprise on the set, you know, because it just is. So, you know, oh my gosh, half an hour, it's already gone. So we're told that someone who was firing that weapon left a live round in it from target practice, put it back on that cart you're looking at there, and then the armorer or the prop man or the first AD or all 3 went and grabbed a weapon out of that mess without looking or checking and handed it to Alec Baldwin and said, it's a cold weapon. I'm sorry, none of that makes any sense.
It doesn't.
It does. If this was a student film and no one there had ever made a movie before and someone's dad owned a gun store, then maybe. But my understanding is, I mean, obviously Alec's done a lot of films with guns. My understanding is that Alec's father was in fact or indeed a gun safety instructor. So for us to believe that this man is totally unaware of all things gun protocol, to me is a last-ditch effort for someone who knows they did something very wrong and very bad to try to push the blame off on someone else.
I'm hearing you. John Schneider, appreciate your time tonight, and I'm hoping that you'll come back after the DA makes her decision on this case. I'd love to hear your reaction when we do get the results of
absolutely.
it.
I would love to. I've got nothing against Alec Baldwin, but I love movies, and I don't want to see this be something that is a stain on the business that I love so much because of someone's attitude.
Gotcha. John Schneider, great to see
Vinnie.
you. Thank you so much. We'll be right back, folks.
The Experian app now.
But yeah, so I think everything was after lunch then. So after lunch, you get back, and that's when you loaded a dummy round. I mean, the blanks. No blanks were loaded. No, like all of today. Yeah, no blanks were loaded today. I was like getting ready for it. I had my fanny pack like full of like blanks and everything. But
okay. So when was the last time you loaded it?
I loaded it with the. So I loaded it with 5 of the dummy rounds before lunch, and there was one that wouldn't go in. And so when we got back from lunch, I took the like little cleaner guy, I cleaned it out really quick, and I put another dummy in there.
Okay, so there were 5 total in the gun.
Yeah.
Can you describe?
6. There was 6.
Total.
6.
That's Hannah Gutierrez. She's the armorer. She's the one that loaded the gun that Alec Baldwin fired, that shot and killed Helena Hutchins. And you heard what she said there. She had loaded 5 dummy rounds. One of them wouldn't go in. Came back later, cleaned it out, then put another one in. All right, let's talk more about this. Joining me now, Miami, Florida, firearms range master, criminal defense attorney, and really attorney to the stars, Bradford Cohen. Haven't seen you in years, my man. Great to see you. Thanks so much for coming out tonight.
Great to see you, too.
And in Westchester, New York, former senior special agent with the Drug Enforcement Administration. And the founder and CEO of Global Security Group, David Katz, who's also an attorney. Great to have you both here. Bradford, let me ask you first. This was what the armorer said. We've been hearing about Alec Baldwin, what he's saying. Alec Baldwin's just handed a gun. He's told it's cold, so he trusts everybody. Your thoughts about that?
You know, it's fairly ridiculous. Anyone handling a firearm knows that when you're handed a firearm, no matter if someone else checks that firearm to make sure that it's not loaded, to make sure there's no obstruction in it. Usually, if it's a semi-automatic, you'll pull the slide back, keep it pulled back, look it down the inside of the barrel. If you're handing it to someone, you hand it to them that way, then they check the gun. And usually after that point, then they can verify that it's empty. In this case, this was like an old time Colt, for better term of what it was. I think it was an imitation Colt. And this type of gun, usually you can, you flip open the little side chamber to it, and you can roll the cylinder to see if it's loaded or not loaded, and to know what's in the gun. Everybody who has handled firearms in the past, even actors, I've been on set with actors where the firearms instructor will tell them, you know, don't take my word for it, check the gun. These are guys that have never handled firearms before. And, you know, this is just a common practice. And there's a video actually going around of Will Smith, and not of him smacking Chris Rock, but there's a video of him on one of his sets, I think it was for the movie Bad Boys, where someone was fooling around with a firearm and pointing it. And he immediately corrected that individual, immediately checked if it was loaded, immediately pulled the slide back, and then made the gun safe and put it back on the table. That's generally what anyone who has any gun experience would do. The way that this happened was so out of the ordinary, and it's just unusual because, like I said, there's so many individuals that practice and get taught how to handle firearms, especially actors on set, that it shocks me that he would not have checked this firearm before pointing it at another human being.
Yeah, David Katz, I mean, you've got the armorer, right, number one, but then number two, Alec Baldwin not only points it, but actually fires it as well. There's so many things happening here that seem so wrong in the handling of a gun.
Yeah, to a great extent, I agree with Bradley with one caveat. I don't want the actor in any way, shape, or form to be the final arbiter of safety on the set. What the armorer should have done is verify the condition of that weapon as being totally empty. And if, in fact, there were to be blank, or not blanks, we're talking about, she said, dummy rounds, which are not blanks. Dummies are inert. And how do you know they're inert? They have no powder, they may have no primer, they may be drilled out. There's a whole lot of ways you could do it. So you open the gun, it's empty, and you verify one. You show the actor this is a dummy round. You see, put it in, and verify each one that way. What you don't do under any circumstances is hand a weapon that hasn't been checked thoroughly. And I can tell you this from a law enforcement point of view. There have been numerous occasions where, for example, what's called simunition training, we used to use, believe it or not, our live weapons. We'd swap out a barrel. The barrel for the live rounds was swapped out with a simunition barrel. We would do paint gun training. Every time we did that, we went to lunch. If there were 12 people training, one person checks everyone, goes to the end of the line. Next person checks everyone, goes to the end of the line. So every single weapon was checked 12 times. Every person's body was checked, patted down for live ammunition 12 times. That's how you do it. You do it with extreme care. You do it with redundancy.
And those are trained professionals. Bradford Cohen, David Katz, great to see you both tonight. We went a little long with John Schneider, so we'll spend a lot more time next time. Appreciate it.
Hey, Vinnie, I'm a Texan now, by the way. I'm a Texan, not a New Yorker.
He's out of New York. He escaped. Someone escaped New York. All right. Good luck there, David. Saving on those taxes. I know that. We'll be right back. should be held responsible for the shooting death of Helena Hutchins? We know Alec Baldwin had the gun. We heard from the armor. We heard from a lot of experts tonight. Joining me now in Los Angeles, California, Deputy Public Defender, L.A. County, Philip Dubé, and criminal defense attorney Ambrosio Rodriguez. We don't have a ton of time tonight, guys, but I saved you for the end to give me the decision here. Philip Dubé, you go first. Who should be held responsible criminally?
I hate to say it, but that armorer. I am so sorry. It is her job to make sure that that is a cold gun, that there are no live rounds. According to her, she checked it. She put in a fifth. It sounds to me like that fifth one was actually a live one. It wasn't checked properly, and you cannot create new rules and procedures on an ad hoc basis and hold actors accountable for the negligence or the acts of other people who also work on set. It was from a criminal standpoint. You cannot ascribe or impute actual knowledge to the presence and existence of a live round in a gun to an actor. The armorer had a very specific job with a very specific duty. And if she left a live round in that gun, passed it on to the assistant director, who then hands it to Alec Baldwin, you know, you go all the way back through that chain of causation to the origin, if you will, of who is responsible for that firearm.
Ambrosio Rodriguez, your thoughts tonight. Who should be held criminally responsible here?
I agree with Philip. Let me just say, it certainly should not be Alec Baldwin, who's at the center of all this and why this case is getting so much attention. In his interview with the police, he was very clear about the methods used and his knowledge of how things should have happened and how shocked he was. And he obviously came off as very believable. There really is no criminal case against Alec Baldwin to be made. And I think it is the armorer who is going to be likely prosecuted or at least charged with some type of manslaughter under a gross negligence or criminal negligence theory.
Okay, explain this to me, and I'll start with you, Philip, and again, about 20 seconds each. Kim Potter, police officer, criminally responsible. She thought she had the taser. Alec Baldwin thought he had a cold gun. What's the difference?
False premise. Cops are trained and work with real firearms on a daily basis. They also work with real tasers on a daily basis. Actors work with replicas, props, and dummies. It is not a fair analogy.
Ambrosio?
Yeah, that analogy doesn't work simply because of the training of a police officer as opposed to what an actor thinks he's doing on set in making a movie and the practice of using, you know, fake guns or guns that are not loaded in making movies. So I just think that analogy doesn't work.
Well, I appreciate your time tonight. Philip Dubé, Ambrosio Rodriguez out in L.A. We'll see you again real soon. When we come back, folks, what's going on in 2022? I mean, every time I turn around, there's another not guilty verdict in one of the cases we're covering. We'll try to uncover why next. 2022 on Court TV has been unusual, extremely unusual. Criminal defendants in court going to trial, many charged with murder, several taking the stand, and one after the other being found not guilty.
We, the jury, find the defendant, count 1, malice murder, not guilty.
Verdict as to count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty.
Verdict. We, the jury, finds as follows. The defendant is not guilty.
What is going on here? Why all of a sudden in 2022 are defendants being set free by juries from around the country? Our think tank weighs in. In Waukesha County, Wisconsin, local residents enjoying a holiday tradition, watching the Christmas parade, when a man driving a car turns his vehicle on parade watchers. 6 people are killed and more than 60 others are injured. And now the man charged with the brutal attack is back in court trying to get the case moved out of Waukesha.
The relief that we're seeking is either a change of venue or the impaneling of a jury from another county.
On the docket tonight in Palm Beach County, Florida, the killer clown trial. Sheila Keene Warren accused of dressing up like a clown, shooting Marlene Warren, then marrying her husband. Tonight, we hear from Marlene's son.
Well, I was so shut down inside, I didn't want to talk. I couldn't talk. I am ready.
Plus, Amber Heard's full interview with Court TV alum Savannah Guthrie aired on Friday's Dateline. Tonight's 13th juror question. Do you think Amber Heard re-defamed Johnny Depp in her interview? Get ready. This hour of closing arguments starts right now. I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. And for those of you who've been following my career, you know I've been doing this for a while. I mean, it's been a while. I joined Court TV originally right after the turn of the century and started covering trials. Before that, I was covering the law as well. But, you know, and first I was a correspondent. I go out in the field, you know, like Chanley Painter, Julie Janae, and Joy Lim-Nakrin, and I'd be in the courtroom. And I remember going around courtroom, traveling around the country. And once it was time for deliberations, the question usually wasn't, are they going to convict him? And it was usually a him. It was more like, how long do you think they'll be out before they convict him? Right? I mean, that's the way it was. And yeah, there were a few surprises. I'm not going to mention it, but that was the norm. And you know, the evidence was usually strong, the arguments were strong, and it was very expected that at the end of the day there would be a conviction. But then came 2022. I don't know where this year came from, but maybe it started in 2021. You know, out there in Kenosha, Wisconsin, Kyle Rittenhouse getting the ball rolling with his not guilty verdict, because this has been bizarre, what we've been watching right here on your front row seat to justice. Are all these not guilty verdicts being returned, one after the other, in serious cases? And, you know, you could agree or disagree with the verdicts, but understand what happens when the jury comes back and says not guilty. It means we don't know what happened. It's like for the victim's family, there's no answer for them. There is no answer. And for someone who is, you know, your loved one has been murdered, I mean, that was all you had, and you don't have that. And it's really, I've never seen anything like what is happening this year. Take a look. Curtis Reeves was charged with 1 count of murder in the 2nd degree and 1 count of aggravated battery after he shot and killed Chad Olson and injured his wife, Nicole, during a dispute over cell phone use while at a movie theater back in 2014. On February 25th, after deliberating for just under 3 hours, a Florida jury found Curtis Reeves was not guilty of all charges. Brett Hankinson was charged with 3 counts of wanton endangerment in the 1st degree after he shot 10 rounds into Breonna Taylor's apartment and endangered the lives of the neighboring occupants back in 2020. On March 3rd, after deliberating for about 3 hours, a Kentucky jury found that Brett Hankinson was not guilty on all charges. Michael Barrasone was charged with 2 counts of first-degree attempted murder and 2 counts of second-degree unlawful possession of a handgun after he shot his trainee, Lauren Kanarek, twice in the chest and attempted to shoot her fiancé, Rob Goodwin, after fighting with the couple for months back in 2019. On April 14th, after deliberating for 4 days, a New Jersey jury found that Michael Barrasone was not guilty on all charges by reason of insanity. Dr. William Usel was charged with 14 counts of murder after overprescribing pain medication to patients who were near death. On April 20th, after deliberating for 6 days, an Ohio jury found that William Usel was not guilty on all charges. Celebrity chef Mario Batali was charged with indecent assault and battery after he allegedly groped and forcibly kissed a woman who was taking a selfie with him back in 2017. Batali waived his right to a jury trial, and on May 10th, after a 2-day bench trial, a Massachusetts judge found that Mario Batali was not guilty on all charges. Ryan Duke was charged with malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, burglary, and concealing the death of another after he and a friend allegedly broke into the home of a teacher and beauty queen, Tara Grinstead, and murdered her, then got rid of her body in a pecan orchard back in 2005. On May 20th, after 6 hours of deliberations, a jury found Ryan Duke not guilty on the murder charges, the assault, and the burglary charge. And Danielle Redlick was charged with second-degree murder and tampering with physical evidence after allegedly stabbing her husband, Michael Redlick, in the shoulder and killing him back in 2019. On June 17th, after deliberating for 2 days, a Florida jury found Danielle Redlick not guilty on the charge of second-degree murder. What is going on? Everyone is, you're not guilty, you're not guilty, you're not guilty. Let's bring the think tank. Maybe they have some answers for me tonight. Joining us in Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Al Wunsch III. Joining us from the Dominican Republic, international man of mystery, criminal defense attorney Darnell Crossland. And in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, family law attorney Jennifer Brandt. Great to see everyone tonight. Al, you've been a prosecutor, you've been a defense attorney, you've been in courtrooms longer than I have, because I think you're older than I am. Are you? Yeah, I think you are, yeah. So what's going on here in 2022? Is there maybe an explanation for this? Are people not believing prosecutors? Are they more skeptical of our government? What's going on here?
Ben, we're going off the rails. Next stop, Crazy Town. Okay, you brought it up last week, and I love it. Crazy Town is at Crazy Town. That's what's happening. We are now in a world of perpetual doubt. Everything is a doubt. Every time the case goes forward, someone has a doubt. They didn't like the way the case was presented. They didn't like the tie that the prosecutor was wearing. They didn't like the fact that the victim was not the nicest person. They're afraid to convict someone who says that they had been beaten in the past or that they have been abused in the past. There is nothing but perpetual doubt going on throughout the minds of these jurors. And it's very interesting. I mean, it's a fascinating study in sociology. As like you said, it was never a question of when or would they be convicted. It was when they would be convicted. How long would the jury be out for? Now they're coming back in record limited, like very limited time, hours, and it's not guilty. And on the most bizarre cases, the popcorn case, and I will say this, I have been consistently wrong on almost every one of these verdicts. I admit it here freely. I'm saying it now. I have been consistently wrong. There hasn't been one verdict I have gotten correct. Since OJ forward, I have not gotten a verdict for it.
Darnell, Darnell, you're part of this. You've got your winning streak going as a criminal defense attorney. We've talked about that in the past. Are you sensing some difference in the public when they come and they get that jury notice and they sit down? Are they more skeptical of prosecutors? Are they skeptical of the evidence? Do they not want to believe what the government is saying? What is going on, Darnell?
Well, listen, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And when I tell you that there's nothing crazy about what's happening here, this is not crazy town, and I reject that notion. The idea here is that it's been for so long, the prosecution has always been the good guys. That's why Court TV and all the other networks love putting up former prosecutor as though they're telling the truth or we could believe them. And I have nothing against anybody who's a former prosecutor.
That's me. You're talking about me, Darnell.
Yes.
That's my whole thing.
Sonny,
I am the former prosecutor.
You, Sonny Houston, all of you guys, former prosecutors, as though, hey, we better believe what they said. But Jennifer Brandt is just as credible as a family attorney. I'm just as credible as a criminal defense attorney. But what's happened for so long is that everyone is bent to believe in these prosecutors. And the judge, good morning, Mr. Prosecutor. Good morning, Madam Clerk. Good morning. And the defense bar is only a guest in their house. And that's been going on for too long. 2022, I just beat a murder case, State versus Hayes. And in that trial, the judge forced me to try the case with co-defendant over all objections. And then when we started getting along and working together, the judge got upset. At the same time, a federal judge is telling me that I must start picking a jury while I'm doing a trial in a state court. So we got our verdict today. I started picking a federal jury the next morning. That's abusive.
Let me ask you, Darnell, because you can give us some insight into this, right? You say you beat a murder case. Was your client actually innocent?
Absolutely. And that's the thing about it. In my closing argument, we heard so much about this thing called GSR, which is gunshot residue. And in my closing argument, I said to the jury, we heard hours and hours about GSR, but we never saw any GSR connected to my client. So I guess when it comes to Black and Latinos, you're guilty for some reason. So GSR now has a new meaning. And the jury thought that was very, very funny. And it is true, because they talked about GSR, but they never connected it. So I said, GSR, ladies and gentlemen, must be guilty for some reason when you're Black and Latino. And they came back with a not guilty verdict after 4 days on the murder case. And they were innocent. But yet still, they tried this case. And to me, that was the injustice to put us through this. Even though we won, well, who wants to go through that? And so I'm so happy that juries are standing up saying, no, defense attorneys, defendants are not guests in this room. This is not going to be a pre-cooked decision, and we're going to go ahead and voice these opinions.
Jennifer Brandt, here's my theory. You ready? I'm going to throw this out. You can agree, disagree, or I want to hear your theory on what's going on here. I think there's a lot more skepticism about the government, and I think prosecutors are part of the government. They are. I mean, there's no way around it. I mean, in federal court, they actually refer to themselves as the government. And I think they might want to, shy away from that a little bit, because I think people are questioning the government because of what has happened over the course of the last 2 years in this country. And there's a lot of skepticism coming from all different places about the trust in our government. And then at the end of the day, if you're not trusting the government, are you going to trust a prosecutor? Because a prosecutor is an arm of the government here. What are your thoughts, Jennifer?
I absolutely agree with you, Vinnie, on that one, and I don't always agree with you. You know that.
I know.
I think people
trust me, I know.
I think people are much more skeptical these days of the government, police, prosecutors, the state. So people are really questioning what is going on, really taking a hard look at the facts and the evidence. But the question here is, have we gone too far? Have things got to a point where people are so skeptical of what a prosecutor might say or the case that they're bringing that they're making some questionable decisions in light of a lot of evidence. I mean, we talked a lot about the Danielle Redlick case, and it seemed like there was a lot of evidence pointing to her as, a murderer. And the jury found her not guilty. The popcorn murder case, we spent a lot of time on that one, and the jury found him not guilty. I mean, you have to trust the jury system, and that is our system of law. But, you know, are we getting to a point where people are questioning the government and doubting the government to such an extent that maybe we're getting some verdicts that, you know, are questionable and may not be accurate? I mean, it is what the jury found, and you have to believe the jury, but is the pendulum going to swing the other way? And I think that's, you know, that's what people might start asking after seeing a lot of these not guilty verdicts.
You know,
I mean,
it's one after the other.
Lunch to be
Just a
wrong
ton. We
all
shall
the
see.
time, you know, that's hard to
About
believe.
time.
All right. Good perspective. They're with us the whole hour. Al Wunsch, Darnell Crossland, Jennifer Brandt. When we come back, we're going to take you out to Waukesha, Wisconsin. Darrell Brooks. This is the guy who was behind the wheel of a car. 6 people died. More than 60 were injured. Big developments inside the courtroom today. He wants the case out of Waukesha County. Also entered a plea today that may surprise you a little bit. All of that next.
I called an Uber, and I'm supposed to be waiting for it over here, but I don't know when it's coming. Can you call it for me, please? I'm homeless. I don't know. It's going to be him. Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. That's fun. My ID. My ID. Hey, do you know this guy? Absolutely not. Okay.
That was some Ring video. Darrell Brooks, he's the man accused in the Waukesha Christmas Parade massacre. 6 people killed, more than 60 hurt. As the man behind the wheel of that red car, just running people over. Big hearing in the case today, and Stephanie Haynes from our great affiliate WTMJ out in Milwaukee has a look at what's taking place inside the courtroom.
Brooks faces 83 charges in Waukesha County Court, including 6 counts of first-degree intentional homicide. Back in April, the judge sent out more than 2,000 questionnaires to potential jurors in the county to see if an impartial jury could be seated at Brooks' trial, which is set for October. In court documents, Brooks' attorneys say more than 1,500 questionnaires were returned, and of those, more than 700 indicated that they either attended or knew someone who attended the parade. They state 45% of all potential jurors indicated yes to questions about trauma impact. Close to 200 reported donating to fundraisers. Some responded they knew someone who was hurt in the parade. Others report they have been closely following news of the case. Brooks' attorneys write some of the responses, quote, were accompanied with diatribe indicating extreme bias. In one example, a potential juror didn't answer any questions and wrote, quote, yes, he should pay for his crime. Prosecutors say there's no need to change the venue. In their documents, they say they can further question potential jurors in person in a process called voir dire, which happens right at the start of trial. And finally, they write it will be tough on the victims if the trial is moved to another county.
So there you have it. The man accused of running over all the people in the Waukesha Christmas Parade doesn't want the case tried in Waukesha and doesn't want people from Waukesha judging him at this murder trial. Here's the judge rendering her decision today.
The court, of course, started by asking the following question. When does the publicity attending conduct charged as criminal dim prospects that the trier can judge a case as due process requires impartially, unswayed by outside influence? Given the facts presented in this case, the relevant statutes, constitutional provisions, and case law, it is clear to this court that a change of venue is not required. This court is committed to ensuring that the rights of Mr. Brooks to a fair trial and an impartial jury are protected. In this case, the defense has failed to demonstrate that there is a likelihood of community prejudice so pervasive as to preclude the possibility of a fair trial in Waukesha County. The defense has also not demonstrated actual bias or actual prejudice in this county. There is no doubt in the court's mind that an impartial jury can and will be impaneled in Waukesha County with the strong methods outlined today. For all of these reasons, the motion to change venue is hereby denied. For the same reasons, the motion to impanel a jury from another county is also denied.
Both motions denied. That means the people of Waukesha will judge this man in a courtroom in Waukesha County Wisconsin. And that's what you want. You want the people of the community judging a crime from their community, as long as you can get the fair and impartial jurors. Let's bring back in our think tank, Al Wunsch, Darnell Crossland, Jennifer Brandt. Darnell, do you concur with the honorable judge?
No, I'm pissed. I'm so sick and tired of being sick and tired. All you hear all the time is the same thing we just talked about in the last segment. The defense has failed to prove this. The defense has failed to prove that. The defense is, and we're committed to doing this, and give these flowery speeches. And all that is wink, wink, prosecutor. You won this motion again. And that's why in the last segment, I was so pleased that juries are saying, I don't care what kind of wink, wink you do. I don't care how many motions of mine that you're going to deny. We're going to have the final word. And they can't change that. And so that's why 2022 in the last segment is a breath of fresh air. That's all we get as defense attorneys is they failed to do this, they failed to do that. God forbid you come in 5 seconds late, you get yelled at. The prosecutor can come in an hour late and they just say, okay, we'll get going when Mr. Prosecutor, Madam Prosecutor gets here. I'm sick of it. We have to fight every single day for just a right to breathe. And as a former prosecutor, you might not appreciate this. But we, as a defense attorney, we're really the constitutional barriers. And you know, I might be getting emotional with this, but I disagree with that whole little speech that the judge gave when you heard people say straight out that they basically can't be impartial, that this guy should pay for his wrongs, et cetera. And just lastly, it's not about just having people from Waukesha judge this guy. It's just about having a day in court with a fair panel, a fair jury, and I don't care if they came from Jupiter. And that's what this is about.
Well, Jennifer Brandt, we do have that French word, voir dire.
That's right, Vinny. And I disagree with Darnell tonight because Darnell is getting on his soapbox about defense attorneys and prosecutors, and it's really not about any of the lawyers involved. It's about searching for the truth, getting to the right result. And it's not about who gets, to come in 5 minutes late or an hour late or any of that. It's about getting to the right answer. And here, the judge, she sent out a questionnaire. The court sent out a questionnaire. How many? 1,500 people responded. They found that 45%, 45% were biased potentially, but 55% were not. And they're looking for a relatively small number of people to sit on this jury. They had, 720 responses that were negative, but then they have over 800 that are positive. And of 800 people, I think they can find a fair and impartial jury. And I think this judge, they did what they had to do to ensure that they're going to get a fair jury. And shouldn't it be in the county where the crime was committed? This is the community that was affected the most by what happened. And these are victims here that were hurt and their family members that are all here in this community. So why are we, aren't we looking for the right result again and not about who gets some favoritism or, whether the prosecutor gets the wink, wink or not? That's not really what it's about. It's about coming to the truth of the matter.
That affects the verdicts.
No, not necessarily, Darnell. No, I understand your position. I understand that you may feel that way as a defense attorney. I get it. And I'm in front of judges, and sometimes they seem to favor one side or the other, and you feel like you have an uphill battle. But that's our job. That's what we're paid to do, and that's what we do. We fight for our clients. We advocate for our clients. And so, but at the end of the day, you weigh all the evidence, and you hope to come to the right result so that, if there's someone who committed a crime, they should pay for it. And if they didn't, well, then they're not guilty. So that's our jury system.
Al, I'm going to throw a curveball at you. Ready? I want you to take a listen to what happened after this decision when it was time to enter the formal plea. Let's watch.
The court had given us until, I believe, July 1st or June 30th to enter any special pleas, and it is Mr. Brooks's intention to change his plea to not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect.
Al, is this, it's an insanity plea, right? Mental disease or defect. Sometimes there are people who are legitimately have the long history, they don't know right from wrong, whatever. is this a situation where you think that's actually happening, or is it like there's no other defense, so we're going to try the insanity defense? Because it seems the evidence is pretty clear that he was behind the wheel of that car.
Yes, and I think that that's a smart move on the defense side to come in with that at this late date and put that forward. They're keeping it in that county, so we might as well do that. I just want to point out one thing, then, that your Crackerjack staff pointed out that I was correct on the Mario Batali verdict, and I was correct on the Bruce Springsteen verdict. So I have to go back and apologize. I was wrong on saying I've been wrong all the time. And on Darnell's situation, I understand he's very upset. My understanding is that someone stole his pail and shovel on the beaches of the Dominican Republic, and he's been very upset since then.
Yeah,
so I can understand that. And the lifeguards refuse to look for it.
Me.
And
It
that
wasn't me.
is a whole, what we don't know. We're going to be checking on this later. It's going to be the case of the stolen pail and shovel. Darnell?
Vinny, can I just touch on this, on the McNaughton rule? So the McNaughton rule says whether a person understands right from wrong in terms of the insanity defense. Just because you do something insane doesn't make you insane. So driving through that parade of people was an insane act. Now, when you start looking at the McNaughton rule and the other rules that apply to the insanity defenses, they're going to have to look at his history and a bunch of other things. And I think it's the right thing to do to at least plead that defense, and now they have to prove it up.
Yeah, it's a smart move.
Yeah.
It's definitely a smart move at this stage of the game to come in with that. I mean, what else? And you know, everyone who looks at this, what's the first thing you say? That guy's crazy. So, I mean, you certainly are hitting the right chord by at least examining it. Whether or not they can establish, you know, the McNaughton rule is, you know, yet to be seen.
Yeah, but we want to remind everyone, top of the show, there was a case out of your state, Al, which is also my home state of New Jersey, where the jury came back and found someone not guilty by reason of insanity. So nothing is a given, especially in 2022. All right, when we come back, we're going to take you on the docket, the killer clown trial. We're going to hear from the victim's son. He was there when that clown rang the doorbell, and his mom answered the door, and the clown shot his mother and killed her. That's next.
209.
Years ago, a person dressed as a clown, holding flowers and balloons, rang the doorbell at Marlene Warren's home. But when Marlene answered, the clown shot her to death.
Advanced DNA testing led authorities to Sheila Keene Warren. The defendant ended up marrying the victim's husband.
It's like a Lifetime movie plot.
This is going to be a riveting case.
The Killer Clown Murder Trial. Live coverage coming soon on Court TV.
On the docket tonight, the Killer Clown trial. And this is one unlike any other, right? I mean, someone decides they're going to kill someone, but first, I'm going to dress up like a clown. I mean, it's kind of sick when you think about it, but it seemed to be relatively effective because this was a case that went cold for a while, a long while. Megan McRober from our great affiliate WPTV down in West Palm Beach, Florida, has a closer look at the case tonight and an interview with the victim's son who was there that day. Take a look.
Well, when you've already waited more than 30 years, Joe Aaron says that he is tired of waiting, but his attorney says it could be as little as 4 months or even next year until there is a new trial date. When that day comes, Joe says that he will sit through every second of the trial.
My mom was an angel.
Joe Aaron's final day with his mom was almost exactly 32 years ago.
We were best friends.
Even decades later, his memory of her kindness is crisp.
I look at myself and I still see her in me. The eyes, the smile.
Aaron hasn't spoken publicly about his mom since she was killed.
Well, I was so shut down inside, I didn't want to talk. I couldn't talk. I am ready.
It was May 26th of 1990 at their home in Wellington.
It was just a regular morning. You know, we were planning the day and eating breakfast.
Aaron's was home with his mom, Marlene, and some friends. There was a knock on the door.
Were you the first to find your mom?
We were pretty much all together, you know, right there at the door, and she answered it.
Marlene greeted by a person in a clown costume with balloons and a bouquet of flowers. Investigators said the clown pulled out a gun, shot Marlene, and walked calmly back to their car. Marlene died 2 days later.
I felt my heart, my soul just get ripped out of my body.
Joe was just 20 at the time, an aspiring pilot, getting ready for college. Losing his mom changed his life's trajectory for the worse.
At first, I did not know what was going on, what was up or down.
He long struggled with substance abuse.
I was holding on to the anger and the animosity, and it was just ruthless.
It took decades to accept he might not get closure.
One of the detectives, Williams, told me, we're going to find out who did this no matter what, even if it takes 25 years.
But hope did come at 27 years. Sheila Keene Warren was arrested in Virginia thanks to improved DNA technology. She was living there with Michael Warren, Marlene's husband, at the time of the murder. The two were married nearly a decade after Sheila Keene Warren was accused of killing Marlene.
She took my life out of selfishness and greed.
Keene Warren's trial was set to begin this week, but her attorneys asked for more time to gather witnesses and review more evidence.
So aggravating.
Tough news, as Joe says he's already waited long enough.
They need to do something soon so I can go on with my life.
Hopeful to see a conviction this year that he's dreamed of for decades.
I want the truth and, you know, an end to this tragic thing.
Joe tells me that if he could say anything to Sheila, it would be that she could still get help, and that, quote, if she reaches out to God, she might get it. He says he has found purpose by working with rehabilitation centers, helping other people with addictions and their personal struggles.
It's frustrating. I mean, think about waiting all those years for an answer. Then finally there's an arrest. And then there's delay after delay after delay. Let's bring back in the think tank Al One, Darnell Crossland, Jennifer Brandt. Jennifer, we often talk, and it's for a reason, right? I mean, it's part of the Constitution, right, to a speedy trial for a defendant. But sometimes defendants don't want that speedy trial for whatever reason. Things get delayed, but the victims, they never have that right to a speedy trial, and they have to wait and wait and wait for the trial to happen, to find out what happened to their loved one, to get some answers and hopefully get some sense of justice. And that just hasn't happened for this poor guy.
No, and I mean, you can hear it in his voice. It's been a lifetime for him, 31 years that he's had to wait to get some closure on what happened to his mother. I think it took 27 years to find Sheila King Warren and to arrest her, and now he's still waiting and waiting and waiting. On the flip side, and Darnell, I think will like this, if Sheila King Warren is not guilty, then think about her too. She's been sitting in jail for all this time, and she's been waiting for the trial. So for everyone involved, I think there needs to be closure on this matter and to figure out what happened and get to the trial already and get it moving. It's been such a long time.
Yeah, Al, this is difficult. This is people from the outside looking in at our system of justice are like, why does it take so long? Okay, we understand it took a long time to solve this case. They had to use some form of advanced DNA. The technology got better. They were able to get enough proof that they believed was enough to prove it beyond any and all reasonable doubt. We'll see at the trial. But it's frustrating and puzzling for the public on why these cases take forever.
Well, in a case like this, it took that long because of the fact that they didn't have an eyewitness. They didn't have anyone who put her there. She was a suspect from almost the beginning, if I'm not mistaken, but there wasn't enough evidence to arrest her. It demonstrates that the system works more than anything else.
I get that, but then once someone gets charged, from the time you get charged till we get a trial, it takes year after year after year and keeps getting put off.
But that's also demonstrating that the system works, okay? That means that you're not going to trial before you're ready. It means you're not going to be rushed to justice. Delays in the defense side are a benefit to the defense. They're really a benefit to the state. So, the fact that she's sitting in jail, that's a consequence, of course, but it's her side that wants to make sure that when they go in and there's going to be the pitch and the swing, that they're going to be able to give the best at bat they possibly can. So under those circumstances, this is the perfect example of when the system is working, because they don't want to rush to justice, and there should not be a rush to justice. I mean, the victim, I feel very badly for that man that he's had to live this life this way with the doubt and everything else. But I'm sure he wants to make sure that justice is done. It seems like he's found a higher power. And God only knows, and of course today is Brian Wilson's birthday, so it's a perfect segue with that. But God only knows that he wants justice. And I think he wants to know that the person who is convicted is the right person. So give them the time necessary.
Speaking of time, Darnell, we don't have time for you in this segment, because you know what happened. Once again, Al chewed it up. So you're going first next segment. So get ready, Darnell. You're lined up. First up, when we come back, Amber Heard, did you watch Friday night on Dateline, speaking with Court TV alum Savannah Guthrie? I mean, did she re-defame Johnny Depp? That was my 13th juror question. Your verdict when we come back.
870.
In civil case number CL 2019-2911, Mr. Depp's claim against Ms. Heard. 1. As to the statement appearing in the online op-ed entitled, "Amber Heard, I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath. That has to change." In the Washington Post online edition, quote, "I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath. That has to change," end quote. Do you find that Mr. Depp has proven all the elements of defamation? Answer, yes.
Jury spoke very clearly, right? Very clearly. Amber Heard defamed Johnny Depp. She was not a survivor, all of that. He did not hit her. That's what they said. That's what they said with their verdict. So, Savannah Guthrie did this really good interview. I'm so glad that she did it, as opposed to other folks who may have done it at one of the networks. I mean, she knows what she's talking about. Super bright, super smart, Court TV alum. And my question to you was, after watching that interview, did Amber Heard in that interview re-defame Johnny Depp? We begin with our 13th juror comment of the day. Comes to us from Brenda, who said, I would say she defamed him more in the interview than the op-ed. In the op-ed, she doesn't directly name Depp. In the interview, she explicitly says he hit her, which has been decided as false by a jury. Very slippery slope she's taking. Darnell Crossland, your thoughts tonight about Amber Heard in that sit-down interview. I agree with Brenda. It was much more direct, her defamatory statements in that interview than in the op-ed. I can't hear him. Can you guys hear him?
Loud and clear.
Oh, can you hear me?
All right. I thought Al pushed the button to keep you from talking again. It's amazing.
He probably did that.
Go ahead, Darnell.
So we discussed this a little bit before. So the question is, prior to the trial, she made these comments about surviving the wrath, of speaking out against domestic violence, and she implicated that it was Johnny Depp that causes pain. After the trial is over, she's explaining to the world what her feelings are as to the jury's verdict. Now, we all know that there's been guilty verdicts, not guilty verdicts, things that have gone up on appeal. It turns out the jury was wrong, or maybe the jury was right, but they didn't get the proper evidence presented to them upon which they could make a decision. So it's a real slippery slope to claim that she's re-defaming him when she's really just saying she disagrees with the jury's opinion. She should just say that and say why. They haven't said that. And I think she even said that she agrees with it, or she's not going to question the jury's opinion, but then she goes and questions the opinion. So it's a hard articulation that does sound like she's still doubling down on Johnny beat her up.
Yeah, and in most cases, I mean, doubling down is kind of okay, but the case was about defamation. So it's about what she was saying and what she was alleging, what she was accusing him of. It's amazing how this has evolved here. Here's what Tina has to say. It's only defamation if it's proven that her claim is false and it harms his reputation. Right now, it looks like his reputation is intact. That's a good point by Tina, and her allegations are not having any impact on him. Time will tell. So what do you think of that, Jennifer? I think it's a great point by Tina, by the way. That
I agree. I agree. I mean,
nobody believes her anyway, so it doesn't matter what she says, right? So you can't harm his reputation because nobody believes you, Amber.
I know his reputation has been totally rehabilitated by this trial, and if anything, it's better than ever. So I agree. I mean, nobody's really believing her at this point. The jury already made their verdict. They clearly didn't believe her. Public opinion is against her. Social media is against her. So I kind of feel like, yeah, it doesn't matter too much what she says. It's just more of the same. But I'm a little surprised that she was even giving this type of an interview at this juncture. You know, maybe a different type of, you know, discussion about her career or getting her career back on track rather than revisiting all of these issues over and over again. That probably
all right, poetic justice, poetic justice. That's all the time we have. Al Wunsch, Darnell Crossland, Jennifer Brand, thank you so much. We'll see you again real soon. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Kick pain in the Asper cream.
Before we go tonight, I have an important photo to show you. Please take a close look. This is Isaac Leal, missing. He's only 13, missing from Miami since June 3rd. If you see Isaac, call 911, 1-800-THE-LOST, or you can call the Miami-Dade Police Department. Let's get Isaac back to a safe place tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Vinnie Politan. Have a great night. And as always, don't forget to hunt the kids.
didn't even say anything. He just put his hands around my throat and started squeezing.
I've been buried twice already. There's no way I can survive getting hit again.
That's when he taken a knife and cut my throat.
I felt like there